Hey everyone, welcome to another episode. I am your host, the only Kayla, and today I have with me Kate Bugeya. She is a mother of a U.S. troop. Kate, tell everyone about your son Alex and what is it exactly that he does?
He works in the Air Force and his job is to load big shipments. He works in logistics. So he's been doing this since he was 17 when he joined, and he's 21 right now. And he's deployed currently overseas. So he was originally in Kabul. Um, so he's just working to bring people to safety, basically.
So your son, when was he deployed to Afghanistan exactly?
He specifically left on Mother's Day. It was kind of funny because he's like, Mom, we have 2 weeks to get packed. I got to get my whole apartment into a storage unit. And then he's like, now it's 5 days. And then next thing you know, they're like, have your bags packed in a couple hours. So
Wow, it's so crazy how it happens. Everything happens so fast, right?
yeah, it did. Yep.
So now your son was out in Afghanistan throughout this entire time. And, a few weeks ago, the Taliban seized control of the country. What was that like for you as a mother, seeing everything unfold and knowing that your baby was literally there fighting for our country and, in danger?
So he actually um arrived at Kabul the day after you saw that horrible video where the men were falling off of the outside of the plane. And while he was there, he told me that he basically they were getting shot at all the time. Believe it or not, he said that they did have like housing for the troops, but it was just bare bones kind of stuff. They weren't. um, and it was scary because sometimes they couldn't have communication with us. That at one point they had destroyed a lot of the cell phone towers, so you couldn't FaceTime. You were lucky if you got a signal and you could send a message that eventually went through, but it was scary.
Yeah, and it's crazy because we're watching the news and we're seeing these awful deaths and we're seeing what's really going on there, and it almost seems so surreal, right? When you're looking at it, like, is this really going on right now?
Yeah.
And then to know that your son was there was, I mean, I can only imagine how terrifying that was for you and also for him. Throughout the few times that you spoke to him, how was he mentally, physically when you spoke to him?
So it was really crazy because he was in another country. They got there in May, and from May until trying to think when they first went over, it was a few weeks ago, right? August is when it
Mhm.
first, from then they were shipping out tons of machines. He's like, Mom, we're putting planes inside of planes. And and then when he was in Jordan, and he was told, you guys have to get ready and go. You're going to Kabul. He's like, we got to have our bags packed and be ready in a couple hours. And I'm like, are you nervous? Are you worried? And he's like, no. He's like, it's going to be fine. And it's so crazy because I was more nervous than he was.
Now, also, when you mentioned that they blew up some of the cell towers out there in Afghanistan and it was kind of hard to get in contact with him, what were your thoughts during that time? Because I could only imagine not being able to talk to him and see if he's okay, if he's safe.
I guess, like, in retrospect, one of the main things I think about is like a lot of these kids, they're young, they're 20. The 13 soldiers who perished, like half of them were 20-year-olds. It's crazy.
Mhm.
I just kind of think that, you know, they did a great job. A lot of them were kind of like, let's go, let's get it done. And that's the attitude you got to have.
Mhm. Did your son work with or know any of the soldiers that unfortunately passed?
Yeah, he did. Um, I think the soldier's name was, and I only got to talk to him briefly, but I believe the soldier's name was Ryan, who McCarroll, who was having the baby in a couple weeks. And
Yes.
there was, I think there was a group of three of them
Mhm.
that he was working with. And that's another kind of like crazy thing to think about because they were on kind of like a similar detail, and they were injured and killed. And like, I don't know, I look at some of these other posts where the kid's sending his mom a Snapchat saying like, love your mom, everything's fine. And like, that could have been us, I guess. It's
Mhm.
crazy.
Yeah. Now, the news has reported that the last flight of US troops have left Afghanistan. Where is your son now? Is he safe?
So he's not in Afghanistan right now. They're gonna have to stay for a few more weeks. When they got a lot of our machines out, they sent them to another country that
Mhm.
was safe and another base. And I'm afraid I don't know specifically, but they're gonna stay and they're gonna probably process refugees and as well as our equipment that needs to come back to the US. So I think it's kind of like a mess because you tell everyone, have your stuff here by this date. And I mean, he told me before, he's like, Mom, the Air Force is like the Amazon Prime of shipping. He's like, and all these other rinky dink countries are like Etsy shops. He's like, we're moving like thousands and thousands of, crates of things. So there's still a lot of work to be done, I think, is what is
Mhm.
something that's behind the scenes.
Yeah. And now, when was the last time you spoke to your son, Alex?
I spoke to him a couple days ago, and the base that they're at right now is he said that they gave all the housing to the refugees, and they have warehouses with like 40 bunk beds, and all the soldiers are sleeping in these warehouses. And he said, I probably shouldn't say this, but he sent me like a video. You can't really see because it's dark,
Mhm.
and just like you can hear the snoring. And he's like, he's like, some nights it's hard to sleep because you think of all these horrific things that you saw.
Yeah.
There's little kids and stuff. So they're doing a good thing though.
Yeah. Yeah, I could only
Yeah.
imagine what these soldiers that are coming back going to have to deal with now in terms of what they experienced and what they saw. Did your son ever tell you anything about something that he might have seen or experienced while he was there in Kabul?
He I on one of his posts he wrote about how like so when he went to high school, there's a book that in New York State, that's where we're from. It's pretty popular. It's taught in a lot of the schools, and it's called The Kite Runner, and it took place in Kabul. And he's like, I never thought like a few years later I'd actually be here. And he's like, there was like a moment where he saw people, fighting over a cardboard box that they're going to use as a bed for the next, 4 days while they're sitting, waiting, hoping to get on a plane. And just mothers, crying, carrying their like lifeless children in their arms. And I just can't even imagine, being in that situation. I don't know, how old is your daughter?
Three.
Could you imagine having a 3-year-old for like 4 days in the hot? He said the temperature one day was 127, just waiting to get to safety. Like it's crazy. And they're just trying to help.
I saw
So
a video that literally brought me to tears. I couldn't finish it, and it was literally, I believe they were UK soldiers that were, I guess, um, getting or helping refugees, and there was literally women who were handing their babies, literal babies. I'm talking about a 9-month-old. I'm talking about a 3-year-old, and they were just handing it to the soldiers, like, just please take my baby. And it was like, as a mother, could you imagine giving up your child, not knowing where the child is going, but just knowing they're better off than being here with me is just heartbreaking. I could not imagine. And just to know that that's what these people are going through right now it's tough. It's tough.
and the people left behind.
Yeah.
He said they're really cruel to the women. Like they blew up a little girls' school before they left the first time. So it's terrible. It's absolutely like horrible. I
Mhm.
just it's too bad that there's this type of evil even in the world. And I don't know what you can do. You can't change a whole society, I
Mhm.
guess.
Yeah,
We tried.
it's true. It's pure evil, and it's so sad to see that this is what they're going through on a daily basis, and just going forward. When it comes to your son, Alex, I know you mentioned that he is safe. He is overseas right now. When do you plan for him to come back to the US?
Well, I don't know exactly.
Mm.
Um, he 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 likes to surprise people sometimes. So, but he thinks he'll be home right around his birthday. So that's like mid-October. Um, I'm assuming they'll have to like go back to their bases that they're stationed at. So he'll probably have to go back to Fort Andrews
Mhm.
before he can come back to New York State.
Mhm.
So, but we're excited because it'll
Yeah.
be fall and we can celebrate his birthday and stuff. And he'll be turning 22. So
So
pretty cool.
young.
Yep.
Oh, that's exciting. That's exciting. What does it feel like for you as a mother to see that your son is out there, not just fighting for his life, but fighting for an entire country and just being so selfless, putting his life on the line every single day?
I feel super proud of him. It kind of makes you in your own life, like sort of reevaluate things and things you might take for granted, you know? So you got people sleeping on a cardboard box with their little kids, and then, or these troops who are sleeping in like warehouses and, just they're so positive. It just makes you kind of think like you sometimes get upset or maybe worry about things that aren't that important in the
Mhm.
grand scheme of things. So I'm really proud of him. Got a good heart.
Right, he does. Are you worried at all that when he comes back, he might deal with some form of PTSD given what he's seen and experienced out there?
I I think that that's something that every like officer who's been there is probably going to have to work through, I'm sure. So yeah, I do worry about that. So it's just a fact of life, I guess. It's part of I couldn't imagine it. I mean, there's probably been times in your life when you've seen like something very intense, very stressful, maybe a car accident or something like that, and like it changes you. But to
Mhm,
see like all that, I mean, he described it as horrific, and it is. You look at videos, it's horrific.
mhm.
So that's human, I guess, to probably have to process things.
And lastly, what advice would you give to other moms and families out there who their soldiers are still overseas and they're kind of anxiously awaiting their arrival? What advice would you give to them throughout this time?
I guess like the thing that I try to do personally is I just try to always encourage him. I'm like, you got this. They're so lucky they have you because he's actually a really big guy. And he's very like very just mature for his age. And he's very kind of insightful, I guess you could say. And I just think that if you can just give them that encouragement that they need to get through it and just continue to remind them, like, keep your eyes on the prize. You have a nice home to come home to with it. And there's a lot of people that are just going to be starting out.
Mhm.
Just remember you've got it. You've got this to come back to. I think that's what's most important to like keep these people's spirits up.
Mhm.
So
That's
yeah.
great advice. Well, Kate, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk about your son. I would like to thank, of course, Alex for his service, and we are all patiently awaiting his arrival to the US, which is in a few weeks. So I'm sure you are very much excited.
Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.